A study was done recently on people who claimed to have had a bad night's sleep. And what the study found is that if people told themselves that they had a good night's sleep, they felt like they did, and eventually had a day that was full of energy and so on, like you would if you slept well. And the people who told themselves that they didn't sleep well were lethargic and grumpy and had a bad day, you might say. What didn't matter was how long they actually slept. The narrative about the sleep is what decided what kind of day they ended up having. And it's that kind of psychology I want you to keep in mind today as we explore and challenge the idea that you can have a bad day. Now, nearly everyone on the planet at some point in time has said, I'm having a bad day or I've had a bad day. Some people even claim to have had bad weeks, months, or even years. And yet, what if it is not actually true? What difference would that make? Today, I want to challenge the notion that you've ever had a bad day. For a couple of reasons. One is I always want to challenge people when they're lying to themselves and to others, but also because you have such a limited amount of days on this planet. For you to dismiss an entire day, or indeed weeks or months, when it's not really necessary and when it doesn't benefit your life, means you suffer a great loss that you didn't need to suffer. It means when you look back over your life, you're going to see days missing that you dismissed. And yet you could actually have those days as part of your memory banks and have enjoyable moments and memories from those days. Now, you might use different words. You might say you had a bad day or a shit day or it's the worst day ever, or it doesn't really matter how you choose the words for this particular language. What's important is this concept that an entire 24-hour period, or whatever it is that you consider to be a day, since you woke up, is essentially written off because you didn't fully enjoy it or you felt pain. That's what we're talking about here, and that's what we're going to challenge. So within the statement, I've had a bad day, there's two concepts to challenge. One is bad, and the other is day. And we're going to challenge both to kind of open up your mind here. Let's start with bad. Take a moment, stop and think about it. What do you mean when you say bad, or whatever word it is you use? Shit, awful, whatever word it is. What do you mean? One thing I've noticed is that people actually use quite catastrophic words. I've had an awful day, a horrible day, worst day ever. There's a real risk with people choosing this kind of language because there's a hierarchy of these words. If I say something's good and then I say something else is awesome, awesome is way better than good, and amazing is better than awesome. So if I say something's bad and I say it's shit, and then I say it's horrible, and I say it's devastating, and I say it's a tragedy, I'm going down a kind of hierarchy of pain here. And what I found, especially in the modern age, more than anything I've seen before, is that people like to use quite extremist language. And yet, they don't change the meaning of the words. So they might say on the news, a flood kills 200,000 people. And they say, that's terrible. And then later that week, they'll say, I've had a terrible day because their insurance didn't come out as quickly as they wanted it to. They don't change the meaning of terrible, though. So what they're saying is that them not getting their insurance on time is as bad as 200,000 people dying in a flood. And you'll have noticed yourself doing this all the time. You can do it the other way as well. You might say, that's awesome, when talking about the pyramids of Giza, right? This fantastic creation done by human beings. And then you'll say, it's awesome when gas is a slightly lower price than usual. So you're saying somebody building the pyramids and a discount on gas are equally great because you don't change the meaning. And language forms reality. Whatever you think those words mean is what you'll attach emotionally to the situation. So if you say, I've had a terrible day, what you're saying is, I've had a day that's as bad as a flood that kills 200,000 people. You don't think about it consciously like this, but your emotions react to it. You actually have grief for your day, as if hundreds of people have died. Notice that you're doing this. When you say you've had a bad day, or whatever word it is you choose to use, compare it to what? What does bad mean exactly? Start with your own life. Think of, say, the worst day of your life. I don't mean to bum you out, but try and bring it up. The most horrible day that you would never want to repeat out of all the days of your life. Maybe it's the day you were abused. Maybe it's the day someone important to you died. Maybe it's the day that some crushing truth was delivered to you that just wrecked your whole life. Whatever it is, take that as like the benchmark. That's the worst day that you can remember having. And then whatever other day you call bad or indeed worse, ask yourself, where does it rate according to that day? I'm using the same language. I'll say that was a bad day, when someone told me that my parents weren't my real parents and that I'd been kidnapped. That was a terrible day. And then I just said I had a terrible day because someone backed into me in the car park and now I have to get this dent taken out of the front of my car. I'm saying these two are equal. Is that true? So look at the comparison just within your own life. When you say something's a bad day, ask yourself, how bad is it compared to my worst day? And then, if you want to get really philosophical about this, you want to do about the only comparison to other people that I'd actually endorse. Ask yourself, what does a bad day mean for other people around the world? Think of child soldiers in Sierra Leone. What was a bad day like for them? Did they get raped and then murder a bunch of people, including their own family? That's a bad day. Or do you think, what's a bad day for somebody in Siberia? Freezing and starving to death? Or having to kill your own baby because there's not enough resources to feed it? That's a bad day. How does that compare to your bad day? When you're a bit late for work and the local bakery didn't have the sandwich that you prefer. Is it fair to call your day a bad day? Or would those people that you can imagine comparing to consider your life to be fucking heavenly? That they would do anything to trade with you? That they would consider your bad day an absolute blessing from the gods? So you throw around the word bad, or whatever word it is you use to describe your day, without much thought. You don't think you're doing much with that word, but what you're actually saying is that your life is horrific. You're saying that your life is like being in the gas chambers at Auschwitz, when it's really fucking not. The fact that you're watching this video means that you have internet access. It means that you have access to basic electronics. And we can extrapolate from that. There's a good chance there's clothing on your back, that there's a roof over your head when you sleep. There's a pretty good chance you're not food insecure, like you know where your next meal's coming from. And for a vast majority of you in that group, there's also the people who don't have a terminal illness, the people who have loved ones, the people that are able to do something productive with their time, and so on. Most of the people watching this video, probably you included, have, by comparison to the rest of the human race, incredibly blessed lives. You're crushing it compared to, say, most of the people in the middle of the African continent, or most of the people in the Asian continent, or other places where quality of life is third world and things are tough. And they don't even have time to watch YouTube videos because they've got to figure out where the fuck their next meal's coming from, or they've got to dodge bullets, or they've got to avoid the secret thought police, or whatever the fuck it is that they have to deal with that you can't even imagine because you're complaining that, the milk that you just poured on your cereal was a little bit off, and that ruined your day. Keeping that in mind, that kind of idea, like maybe I shouldn't be using the word bad. Let's talk about the word day. Day could be the last 24 hours. If you're looking back over your day and saying that was a bad day, you're thinking from the moment you went to sleep last night until now. Or I think most people, when they think of day, they really mean like since they woke up until now. They'll say, I had a bad day. Well, how much of that period of time, whatever you call a day, how much of it were you actually in pain, suffering, in misery? How many minutes or hours of that day can you say, yes, objectively speaking, I was suffering? Anybody else put in my position would have said that's bad, what I'm going through. Because you're saying, when you say you have a bad day, you're saying the whole period of time, whatever the start is to now, was awful the whole way through without a break. You didn't even get a breath of air out of that whole day. It was just nothing but suffering. Like being on the torture rack for an entire period of time, or going through Navy SEALs Hell Week or something like that. You're saying you didn't even get a breather. You're making this massive kind of broad brush thing here where you're saying it doesn't matter if there are pockets of goodness or neutrality. I'm just going to say the whole thing was bad, which is a fucking lie, isn't it? If you manage to eat a meal, go to the toilet, sit down for a minute, if you had even a few seconds that weren't suffering, then it's a lie to say you had a bad day. You're lying to yourself, and you're lying to others when you tell it. And it's a significant lie. You might think, well, I'm generalizing, and people know I'm generalizing, and I know I'm generalizing. Well, no, actually, you don't. Because when you remember, you're going to say that was a bad day, and you're going to mean the whole day sucked. You're not going to mean, well, when I say I had a bad day, it actually meant I had a bad 33 minutes out of a 12-hour period, and overall, I'd have to say that's actually a pretty good day. You're not really saying that. You're saying, actually, the whole 12-hour period sucked. I write that day off in my memory. I have a bad life because I have a lot of those days, and so on. And you create this whole narrative about how you're suffering way more than you're actually suffering, especially when you ask yourself, how bad was the day if I was to remove the narrative, I'm having a bad day? Just like the study I mentioned at the start, the people who were having, only 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night, if they told themselves that they had a good sleep, then they didn't actually suffer at all from that amount of sleep, or very little. Whereas the people who had a full 8 hours and then told themselves I had a bad sleep, their whole day was ruined, so to speak. The narrative decided how well the day went. The physical nature of their sleep actually mattered very little. And we can say the same about having a bad day. How much actual physical pain you endure in a day matters very little. For example, there are people like David Goggins who enjoyed going through Navy SEALs Hell Week, right? Nothing but pain all day long. They're like, fuck yeah, give me some more. So physical pain wasn't a problem for them. They enjoy it. They're a rare type of person, but they exist. Or somebody like getting a tattoo. Hours and hours under the needle, but you don't say I had a bad day at the end of that. You say, fuck yeah, I got a tattoo. So pain isn't the problem. And there are other people who, if you watch them all day long, you'd be thinking nothing bad happened to them, and yet they'll tell you they had a bad day and that they were suffering and in pain the whole day. Well, what was happening then? You saw, okay, they were in traffic, but traffic's normal, nothing bad. They're just sitting in a car, or they couldn't find a parking space, but they're still just sitting in a car for a little bit longer, and then they park, and then they go to work, and the boss was a bit mean to them, but, he didn't hit them or anything. They still got their job, and they still get money in the bank, and so on. You'd watch all this and go, where's actually the suffering? And they would tell you they had an awful day. But if you go into their head with some sort of philosophical surgical instrument and remove the story, I'm having a bad day, and then ask them, how was your day? They'd probably say, it's fine. Pretty average day. Not too bad. Couple of moments of frustration, couple of moments where things didn't go my way, but isn't that just life? And that would be the accurate description of what happened. If your whole family dies suddenly and you're left alone and bewildered and confused and grieving, fair enough. It's very unlikely you had many moments of joy or even neutral feeling in that day. That's a bad day. That's a whole day where you're basically in suffering and misery and pain without a break. How many of those days have you actually had? Some of you have had those days. Some of you, those were weeks. But then it only kept hurting because you kept telling yourself it was bad. There's actually like a grief guilt that people get. You're grieving over like the loss of something big, and then you feel bad because you're not grieving. Maybe it's only a few days after your dad dies and you laugh at something. You're like, oh shit, I shouldn't be laughing. Actually, it's fine. It's fine to not suffer all the time, but you tell yourself, no, I'm having a bad week because my dad died. You don't want to even acknowledge the fact, no, it's not a whole week, actually. It's a lot of hours, but there's been respite. There's been oases in that grief of times where you felt all right. That's the truth, and you're allowed to have that truth. Rather than use the word day, you want to use moment, minute, phase of time, period. Stop writing off entire days out of your very limited calendar on this planet. And you'll notice that your whole life isn't actually that bad either. There are people who are suicidal on a certain day, and yet later that day they're laughing at something. You can't even say that's a bad day. You can say you had a bad couple of hours, sure. You wanted to kill yourself. But then you're watching some YouTube Family Guy or something and you had a bit of a giggle. Well, that's a pattern break. You're now actually having a slightly good time, at least for a brief period. So you can't say the whole day sucked. That would be a lie. Which leaves us with the truth. The truth is, the only thing that can really ruin your day is you telling yourself that your day is ruined. Hope you enjoyed that video. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe and click the notifications button to keep up to date with all our bullshit. Of course, if you want help changing your psychology to enjoy your days more, don't forget to get in touch. Dan@brojo.org. I'll see you next time.